Welcome to the special edition of the Bob Fu Report. I'm your co-host, Jonathan Dingler, and today and next episode, we're going to be breaking down the top 10 cases of persecution in 2021. The following 10 cases have been selected by China Aid to exemplify the persecution of Christians last year. These cases, or multiple incidences, were recorded to show you just how the communist regime is waging its war against the cross. Now, these cases take place in several different ways. They encompass all areas of China. They encompass both rural and urban churches, as well as house churches, as well as the Three Self-Patriotic movement. They also include not only pastoral staff, but general Christians, Chinese Christian dissidents, and Chinese rights lawyers. Our first case today, we're going to be talking about 7 churches whose meeting places were outlawed by local governments. On February 23rd, a house church in a village in Liaoning province received a notice from its local ethnic and religious affairs bureau that their meeting place was outlawed. A lot of these churches, they don't have necessarily contemporary buildings like Western churches do with an atrium and a child care area or anything like that. Sometimes they meet in apartments, sometimes they meet in office buildings. It varies from church to church. This church in this local village received this notice telling them that they had to get rid of all religious logos, signs, get rid of their offering box, and stop all church meetings from this location. They also received a fine of over 200,000 yuan, which in US dollars is approximately $30,000. From now on, I will be using US dollars approximations for these fines. In March 21st, over 30 personnel raided Mount Olive Church. They sent members home and sealed the church without showing any kind of warrant or notice, an illegal seizure of the property. 3 days later, the same group came back with moving trucks and removed all church property, including chairs, projectors, crosses, and several thousand books from their library. On April 30th, in Yunnan province, officials shut down a Protestant church because the members did not get vaccinated for COVID-19. In all 3 of these cases, we can see that the Chinese authorities pretty much use whatever means necessary to get rid of these churches. They may go through a quote-unquote legal route by giving some kind of notice, or they may just come in with moving trucks and take everything away without showing any sort of documentation. Or they may use COVID-19 as an excuse to get Christians to stop meeting together, which we've seen a lot in 2021. Our next case is how Xinjiang province has persisted in cross demolition. This is an area where hundreds of crosses have been demolished or taken away, and it's becoming more widespread, and it's continuing. On January 15th of last year, a crew hired by a local municipal government used a giant demolition crane to remove the crosses above 2 churches, Yongzheng Church and Konghe Church. Konghe Church called the police station the next day because these are just regular construction workers. They were confused, and they wanted to report that their cross had been stolen and destroyed. But the police claimed that it wasn't part of their jurisdiction to look for a religious symbol. This is the second time their cross has been demolished. In 2014, it was also removed and then replaced with a smaller cross. 5 other churches in Wenzhou, this area where these 2 churches are, 5 other churches lost their crosses to secret demolition on the same day, which seems to indicate that it was a coordinated effort by the Chinese Communist Party. On the night of January 31st, over 100 security personnel broke into the century-old Shuxin Church. They shut off the electricity and demolished the cross around 1 a.m. Their cross was previously demolished in 2014 as well. A small island as a part of Xinjiang province, it's called Kushan Island, has a very relatively large population of Christians, about 1/3 of the population of 70,000 are Christian. And they have a tradition for their fishing boats to have crosses erected and to have Emmanuel spray painted on the sides of the boats. Well, the authorities of Kushan Island have started to seriously crack down on these fishing boats. They are removing the crosses off of the fishing boats. They're not even buildings. They're just removing them off of the vehicles, and they're erasing any mention of Jesus, Emmanuel, and all sorts of things. We're seeing that Xinjiang province, they initially had a wave of demolishing crosses, and they went silent for years since 2014. And now they're coming back to these same places and removing them again. We're seeing that the Chinese Communist Party is relentless in trying to sinicize Christianity, trying to sinicize the religions in the area. And it shows that they're not going to stop. If they come back 6 years later after demolishing a cross just to demolish its replacement, they're going to keep doing this for years to come. Now we're going to turn it over to Bob Fu, who's going to break down our next case.
Thank you, Jonathan, for reporting the first two persecution case in 2021 in China. The third case I want to talk about is the resurgence of the Linfen religious persecution case in Shanxi province. And that is the church known as the Golden Lampstand Church. Their leaders were arrested again and facing a very serious criminal charges. In August of 2021, Golden Lampstand Church's 9 leaders were all taken into custody by this national security of the Linfen city. And these pastors include the senior pastor Wang Xiaoguang and another main leader, Miss Yang Rongli. So Pastor Wang already served 3 years back to 2009 when he was arrested at the first wave of persecution. And Pastor Yang Rongli, she was sentenced to 7 years and served 7 years, actually just released not long ago. And those 9 brothers and sisters from the Golden Lampstand Church, they were all approved for formal arrest according to the Chinese Criminal Law Code on September 27th, 2021, under a totally fabricated charge called fraud, because they were running an unregistered church, a very large church. So here's the kind of some background for you, that some of you may recalled that the Golden Lampstand Church is in fact an unregistered house church group. They are predominantly, the members are centered at the city of Linfen, not far away from the capital city of Shanxi province, Taiyuan. So at that time, in 2009, the church already had a solid 50,000 members. 50,000 diehard believers in the church. And so, it's not like a typical Chinese house church, worship in their own homes. Obviously, 50,000 members is too big. And they were spread it in some different locations. But the church believers feels compelled to gather together as one church. So they voluntarily made offering and contribution about 17 million yuan, which is about $2.5 million US, and complete a building in a gospel. They call it gospel shoe factory, which is owned by one of the church members. It is also a factory producing shoes. I mean, because you can tell from the name, it's called gospel shoe. 福音鞋厂 means the gospel means is Christian owned with the deliberate purpose of that factory for the glory of God. So then on September 13th, 2009, 400 Chinese military police raided the church meeting sites at the Golden Lampstand Church. We actually had photos showing that the completion of the church. It was a beautiful church building, and in fact, the church members had digged in on the underground of the church that they can hold a big gathering, really on the basement of the church. And during this violent attack on that day, more than 100 brothers and sisters were physically injured and damaged. And government organized multiple bulldozers and excavators, basically at that time destroyed some of the smaller buildings surrounding the main sanctuary. And then from September 23rd of 2009, the government basically sent armed police with anti-riot tanks. We also had images about that, surrounded the whole church building 24 hours, 7 days a week from September 23rd. So that 2 days later, on September 25th, Pastor Yang Rongli and her 6 other church leaders were all arrested. And when they were about to travel to the provincial capital of Shanxi province, the Taiyuan city, to really petition to the government. And the government initially tried to buy the church building to in exchange basically for not take a kind of a violent attack, and of course try to forbid their church gathering. So the government offered about $1.5 million US, and of course the church declined and refused that offer. So that resulted the Pastor Yang and other 8 members, they were all charged with a charge called illegal occupation of farmland and gathering a mob to create a traffic disturbance. So Yang Rongli received 7 years and a fine of 30,000 yuan, which is about $4,700 US, and her husband also received 3 years and a fine of 10,000 yuan, about $1,500. And Pastor Wang Xiaoguang and others, and actually her and his family members, several, were also sentenced from 3, 4, some 2 years imprisonment. So the Golden Lampstand Church, as I said, 50,000 members. Sometimes in their annual gathering, they did gather on the farm field, and I heard a lot of stories. Basically, just to feed 50,000 people, on the farm field, and that is a gigantic task. But they were so brave and really, basically, that was the gospel meaning. Many people were attracted to be there, non-believers, and then a lot of them had come to Christ, and even some government kind of officials were there. But after the 2009 forcefully raid, over 30 meeting sites were totally shut down. And I guess that then the church had really go underground from that time on. And but from 2009, to 2018, so 9 years, the government had to have 24/7 surveillance and surrounded by military police vehicles and police. What kind of taxpayers' money they're spending? Just try to prevent any church member from entering into their own church building. We have even the former CEO of Voice Motors, Jim Dahl, personally sneaked in, not into the building, but nearby, and took some photos showing the government military, anti-riot police and vehicles were there, stationed there 24/7. But on January 9th in 2018, the Chinese government decided to demolish the whole Golden Lampstand Church, the main sanctuary. And they demolished that church with dynamite. With the church, basically the military police buried lots of tons of dynamite on the basement and just bomb it and just made an explosion. And so that is how the church was destroyed. And then the church building, after it was destroyed, actually during the destruction, we have some people were standing behind, eyewitnessing. So we have some extraordinary eyewitness taken live videos, photos showing how the church was exploded, basically with debris all over. It's a huge church building that was being totally destroyed. Of course, Golden Lampstand Church now are facing more serious persecution. In 2021, I think in 2022, we'll expect a major trial for these really recently arrested, including Pastor Wang Xiaoguang and Pastor Yang Rongli and 7 others. So please continue to pray for them. In 2022, pray for strength. The Chinese Communist Party usually very mercilessly prosecute and double usually the sentence for those who are called committing repeated offense. So this is going to be a huge persecution case. We'll keep you informed later on as the development comes up. So thank you. May God continue to bless His church. This is certainly not the only church being destroyed in 2021, and thousands of them. But since it happened already in 2009 and then 2018, and now again.
Thank you, Bob, for that report. Our next case in our top 10 cases of persecution in China are the collection of church-run schools that have been under attack last year. The first of which was the Jordan River Learning Center, which is actually a school from Mount Carmel Church in Wuhu. On May 27th, a authorities came into the church and confiscated teachers' cell phones, computers, and books. They sealed the school, blocking access to equipment and student possessions. And they also took the headmaster, Miss Wan Hoxia, and 9 other teachers. They ended up sending them to the detention center and charging them with illegal business operations. Now, all 9 of these teachers and the headmaster, they're all financially vulnerable. They work for the school, they're not able to pay their fines, and they all have children. So please keep them in your prayers as they find a way to support their families. And you can also donate to these families on ChinaAid.org under our Get Involved tab. The next school that was raided was in September of 2021. It was Maizei Christian Music High School in Harbin, which is the capital of the Heilongjiang province. This was a very famous case on the China Aid website. 30 officials came in, including SWAT members, and arrested teachers and students, doing similar to what they do with these other Christian schools. They seize property, books, curriculum, that sort of thing, holding parents in jail or in detention centers. But they also took the principal, Principal Xu, who he's still being charged officially. But you can look for more updates on Principal Xu on the China Aid website as well. The next school was Golden Reed Learning Center, which is actually a church-run school by Golden Lampstand, which Bob just spoke about. As he says, this is a church that's been persecuted for many years, and this school is an offshoot of that ministry. And so it's no real surprise that the CCP would directly target this school. This was a school in Beijing, and it was raided in September. They were given a notice that they were no longer allowed to meet at their location. And this school was pre-K through junior high, and it was mostly, it had over 100 students, but a lot of these students were special needs. In the Chinese Communist Party and the China public school arena, special needs children are heavily discriminated against, and they're not even allowed to go to school. So this provided a way for those students to receive an education. And once it was closed, it really shut off a lot of children's opportunities to learn. So be praying for those families. In September as well, Abeka Academy has 5 agents that work within China. Abeka Academy is a homeschooling curriculum. 5 of their agents and representatives were arrested, including Wang Jian, who organized some of the Chinese curriculum, which was just a huge deal. Abeka Academy is widely used by Christian families to homeschool their children. Pastor Wang Yi, heavily supported from Early Rain Covenant Church. Wang Yi heavily supported homeschooling your children to get them out of the brainwashing institutions of public school in China. And on the same day, a unnamed school from Xinjiang, Jiangsu province, was also raided. It was such in close proximity, not location-wise, but time-wise, to this arrest that a lot of Christians at the time saw this as a coordinated effort to really crack down on Christian education. And that's why it's so important for us to talk about and why it's included in our top 10 cases, because Christian education in China is really one of those institutions that's important, not only because children are able to learn about God and not be brainwashed by the Chinese Communist Party, but it's also an opportunity for parents to freely choose how to educate their children, and that's being quickly taken away from them. Our next case includes the heavy sentencing of 2 house churches, one of them being the Kailai Seventh-day Adventist Church and Pastor Lee Junkai of the Yangyang County House Church in Hainan. So this Seventh-day Adventist church, authorities have basically forced these members to relocate several times in the 20 years that they've been active. And in 2020, there was an investigation that was launched by officials to basically find out how they could charge some of these leaders. And they ended up, that investigation led to 4 fraud charges against 4 Christians. Zhang Wenying was charged with 12 years for fraud. Jiang Qiu was charged with 6. Shi Jikun was charged with 5, and He Seking was charged with 3. And then we also see that Pastor Lee Junkai was also sentenced for 5.5 years back in 2020 on New Year's Eve. Both of these groups, the reason that we brought them up is because they both tried to appeal their sentences in the intermediate court in China, the appeals court, and they were both denied in secret trials. And so both of these groups, they need our prayer. They're in prison. They're trying to legally get their way out and to advocate for themselves. If you want more information on our top 10 cases, feel free to look at China Aid's website. They're under our publications, under the annual persecution report. You'll find all of these cases in much more detail there. Thank you so much for watching, and have a blessed day.
Woman warrior, you were the target of that ancient serpent. You are the last and most beautiful of all creation, and that is why he hates you. It was through you that redemption was made possible. That day when the Creator entered into his own creation, the sinless seed through the nurturing vessel to birth the Redeemer. How confusing it must be to be led by leaders who despise you, use you, degrade you, and desire to kill you. But inside of you is a fire placed there by God himself, a fire that cannot be extinguished. You are his object of affection. The days have been written. The time has been set that only he knows. Trust in that, woman warrior. Be fearless in your resolve. Your enemy will never be like you. He may try to look like you, walk like you, talk like you, even attempt to take away your name. But he will never be God's object of affection. The serpent and his offspring will try as they will, but they will never be the last and most beautiful of all creation. They will never be a woman.